Welcome back to Nazranis in the City. I'm Josh Abraham once again.
And I'm Abi Abraham.
And man, I guess it's part two. So our last episode was just us sharing our stories, right? Character development is a great way to put it. Just allowing or wanting to give the audience, the listener, insight on our walk with the Lord, kind of from the beginning of our lives to where we left off, where you and I crossed paths in seminary. It was your first seminary. It was my third year of seminary.
Right.
And actually, what a great place to end off, because that year changed both of our lives.
Right. Absolutely.
In somewhat similar ways, somewhat different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just I don't know. I think it's good. Like maybe just to recap. Like at this point, both of us are learning to take our relationship with the Lord a lot more seriously.
Mm-hmm.
We're learning much more about the nature of discernment, and that's a whole podcast episode we want to do. At this point, we've had it's not us figuring it out. We've had people walking with us, right? I had Father Ed, you had Nitin Chetan, then we both had Father Matt at this point. Yeah, so maybe let's just continue the story and get to where we are now. Abby, take it away.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, I think for me, in a very good way, the short time I was in seminary was more of one long come and see. Right. So it was like,
yeah. I see that.
For those of you who don't know, I was only in seminary for 6 months, basically only a semester, and that's really odd, right? Like most of the time, people at least stay a year, and if not more, on the surface, it seems like, oh, I was just jumping, right? I was too scared or something, and I told myself that for the longest time, right? That's why I kept avoiding it, and even once I was out, kept beating myself up for it, because I was like, was I just scared? Right. And all of these things.
There's so many lies that can fill up in your head.
Absolutely. Right? And I think at Seek, right, there was just that one sister that we approached and we kind of told about.
I was just thinking about her.
Yeah. And like we were talking, we met, and then we mentioned like, oh yeah, I just discerned out of seminary. And she just kind of like shut me up there for a second. It was just like, okay, time out. The Lord discerned you out of seminary. Right.
Moment of clarity.
Right. And this is a sister that doesn't really know me, doesn't know my story, doesn't know how long I was in there. So it wasn't like trying to comfort me or something. Right. It was really more of a loving admonishment of this idea that
a gentle slap in the face.
Right. And like you said, we'll get more into discernment later, but that was a key point, right? And I think, like I said, it was more of a long come and see. This long experience of the Lord showing me what this was about.
Right.
And that's what I needed. Right? Because I think going back to this whole thing of this dilemma I've had of should I even be going into seminary? I think this was a sort of testament to yes, yeah, you did need to see it.
And can we? I just want to tangent here just a little bit, because I think it's important to point out, and we'll have we want to have a whole podcast on like the struggles of discernment, right? But I think part of that pressure of coming into seminary for both of us was this idea. I don't know if it's from Kerala culture. I don't know if it's from the Sri Malabar church. Something is causing this idea to arise that if you enter seminary, you're locked in.
Yeah.
That entering seminary is equal to you're going to become a priest.
Right.
Which at the end of the day is not the case. Right?
Especially college seminary, man. Like
facts, bro. Facts.
And all of these, yeah, exactly, like you're saying, right? These subconscious lies. I mean, sometimes conscious, but oftentimes like just deeply rooted that kind of affects our decision making. And for me, looking back at it, I can honestly say that if I hadn't gone to seminary, I wouldn't be in the same place, even though objectively it's the same vocation.
Right.
Like
where you are.
Where I am right now, right? I we can always hypothesize, well, if you hadn't gone to seminary, you'd be 6 months ahead of where you're supposed to be right now.
Right. But like, on what terms? Like, what kind of sort of progress are we talking about here?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And from there, I'd gotten to this point of relationship with the Lord, and eventually it became very clear to me that I wasn't supposed to be here. And I kind of told myself initially when this thought came up, finish the year, right? And in most circumstances, that's not a bad thing. Like that's a good thing, right? And in fact, we'll get into your story of like this idea of like sticking with it for that certain amount of time, right? Even if you're not sure. And so I kind of told myself that, but it became more and more clear that it would almost be wrong of me to stay when I knew I wasn't supposed to be there.
Sure, yeah.
And I think anymore, not supposed to be in seminary at all, but that now was my time to go back.
Right.
And because that's a very important point, that it wasn't leaving seminary in itself. It was a very specific call to go back to my community.
Sure. And
I kept putting that off, but it became more and more clear that was the specific call.
And I even remember you saying sometime before you left, you'll know when you're called to leave. Like God will make it, in your words, abundantly clear. And it seems like he did for you.
Right. Yeah. 100%. So, I'm coming back from seminary and everyone's rightfully confused. Yeah. Because literally just months before this was this big, I had like this big sort of send off, right? Of like everyone like, yeah, we finally got a seminarian from our community. And things like that.
There's all this hype building up. Bishop Barron features you on his page.
Oh man, that's how everyone found out.
right. For context, Bishop Barron, you went to
a talk at Facebook.
A talk at Facebook in Northern California. Bishop Barron was the speaker, and then at some point you get to talk to Bishop Barron. You say you're entering seminary, right? And you gave credit to his ministry,
right.
And then he takes a picture with you, posts it on Facebook, and says, "This man is entering seminary, right? Because of Word on Fire."
Yeah, and the next day, my phone is just ringing, and I wake up to all these notifications from my parishioners about, like, congratulations, like, amazing. Right, I get texts from my brothers like, you didn't tell us this, man. And like all these things. I was like, hey, I didn't know either, honestly. And it just became this whole thing of, I'd made the decision, but it also kind of like put me on this pedestal. And
added pressure, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah.
And that wasn't a great setup.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people in our community fall into that. Especially because we're a growing diocese, that the idea of becoming a seminarian, the immense spotlight that's sort of put on people, I think can be really dangerous, right? And
it kind of takes away from the freedom that each seminarian
that's
needs,
the key, right? Freedom.
In order to really discern. I mean, really, the secular word for discern is to carefully consider, right? And that you need a lot of freedom in order to do that, and to have so much weight put on seminarians, I think it takes away from that.
Yeah, and a lot of it was just like innocent ignorance, right? Of like not knowing how to treat somebody that was going to seminary.
Yeah,
and not knowing how to treat somebody that was coming back from seminary.
Right,
because this is so foreign to our community, especially my community, as I mentioned before, like very new, right? And really not just new in the sense of new from people from our community going to seminary and this whole idea of the larger diocese and vocations and all of these things, but also we just have had very little exposure to the greater diocese in general, to the greater church in general. Our parish has been so confined to this own bubble of its own that honestly, even until this point, like many people have not been able to travel to different churches to understand different seminarians, the new priests, and this whole context of there's something bigger than St. Thomas, San Francisco.
Right.
And I think for a lot of people, again, not even from a place of pride, but just from a place of, I would say, opportunity, we just haven't had as much connection to the rest of the diocese, to the rest of the larger church. And that has been a huge hindrance for many people in understanding some of the decisions that I make. And I think, again, more of an innocent ignorance than anything with malicious intent.
Sure.
So coming back, the typical pressures of what career are you going into was almost amplified by the fact that I went on a certain path and decided not to go in that.
Right.
Because it was like, hey, you only get 3 strikes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That sort of mentality, right? And it was like already strike 1. So it's like, what's next? And so immediately I jump into, okay, I'm not really sure, but I need to get a job because I need money to survive here. So I'm going to go study business. So I enrolled in community college to get my classes out. And then my plan was, okay, let me transfer to one of the UCs and we can go from there. Good plan, solid plan. Nowhere in there was the Lord. Not a single part of that was coming from the place of what am I going to that I had left seminary with.
In retrospect, you can say this was you maybe out of a place of fear, taking your life into your own hands.
Absolutely. Right. And a huge part of that was just that's kind of what I was told to do.
Yeah. Because I think like we always talk about discernment when it comes to seminary.
Yeah.
But rarely do we recognize discerning what the Lord is calling you to. That's a responsibility on everybody's part. Every single person has to ask that question, Lord, what is it you are asking me to do? Yeah,
100%. And I think I'd almost forgotten everything that I'd learned up till that point.
Yeah.
Out of fear, because it's crippling, right? And I think from there, it just almost became like, okay, realize that wasn't for me. Strike 2. Right. So after that, I go and I actually go to Florida because I was so confused that I was like, I need to go talk to some like counselors, and I heard good things about like Sonaluncle and the Amoris Christi program.
Huge JY presence there, really good people.
Exactly, amazing people. And that was such a blessed weekend. And
let's just get like a chronological timeline going. So you had just discerned out, and this is like February, March of, or like this is 2019.
2019.
Yeah.
2019. So I was doing community college for a couple of months with that plan of kind of going down, studying business, getting a normal job, all of that thing, all that stuff. But something felt like terribly wrong.
Yeah.
And so once I stopped that, so at that point I was really confused because I thought those were the only 2 options.
Right.
So I go to Florida, and Sonaluncle really helped me get a lot of clarity in coming back to my identity, right? And I think that was so key for me to kind of recollect where I was when I left seminary. And he really helped me come back to that and recognize, like, look, it was the first time I'd heard a Malayali adult tell me, look, I'm not concerned about you getting a job. I'm not concerned about what degree you're getting. I'm not concerned about any of this. But what I am concerned about is you're not doing this with the Lord.
Yeah.
Because I had openly said that. Right? It wasn't too hard to figure out. And that was tough to hear, but it was also like tough to kind of hear that confirmed, because I was almost waiting for him. I wanted him to tell me something else. I wanted him to give me some like deep spiritual insight that, oh, this is what you should be doing. You
wanted him to reveal to you.
Yeah, I kind of wanted it. I wanted an answer through this vessel of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Right, which he is.
100%.
Just not in the way I wanted him to be.
Right.
At the moment.
And there it is once again, us trying to do our own thing, trying to take our life in our own hands.
Right. And I think, it just became very clear to me that I was just trying to fit in, not necessarily into a certain community or a certain idea, but I wanted to be normal in a sense, because up till that point, there was nothing normal about what I was doing.
Yeah.
Whether it be seminary, whether it be coming out of seminary, whether it be dropping out of college or any of these things. So then I was like, okay, let me be like semi-normal. I love philosophy. I'm going to go study philosophy. Right? Now that decision, I think actually did come from a place of prayer. Right? There was partially a little bit of like fitting in. I should probably go get a degree and all of these things, and even advice from Sonal Uncle and things of like, yeah, maybe you should go study that. If that's something you like, it could help in your ministry and things like that. And 100% I was with that. But so I went and did that, and months in, I'm studying philosophy. Nothing wrong with the school. Great school.
This is an online program.
Online, yeah, Holy Apostles.
Yeah.
And great program. But at the same time, I got to this point of being honest with myself that I was not learning at the same, like I was not learning as efficiently as I was just reading myself. And again, that's not to criticize college even, or to criticize Holy Apostles, or to recommend this to anyone. But it was more just for me, when I started being honest with myself, I didn't have any trouble academically. I was doing just fine, like getting solid grades on my papers and all of these things up to date. But it still felt like, honestly, this is more of a this is more constricting me than it is freeing me. Because I stopped doing the reading I was outside of school. I stopped writing as I was outside of school. Everything became about the assignments within that program, which again isn't a bad thing for most people. But for me, it did become too constricting to where it was almost like I was starting to lose the love of philosophy.
And you didn't want to do that.
I didn't want to do that. Yeah. I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want to just have the philosophy degree, again, for me.
Right.
And I think that's the key thing, is because we know how we differ on this, right? Of like where we kind of go off from there, which you'll get to. But for me, that's what was so hard about it for me. Was I looking at it objectively, I was like, no, this is a good thing that I'm studying philosophy and all of these things. And that's true. But it goes back to this whole thing of when we try and make a decision, we try and make the other decision look like bad. So that we can feel comforted in making whatever decision.
Yeah.
Right?
Give ourselves some consolation.
And this goes back to the whole thing. It was really between two goods.
Yeah.
But finding which one was for me.
And I think the another way to put this is that philosophy was good. There's nothing wrong with it. But in your heart, there was something tugging at you. And you paid attention to that. That's the key.
Right.
Yeah.
And man, like that was probably the toughest decision up to that point, because that was kind of the third strike.
Yeah.
Right. Of like, really? You're going to quit on this too?
Right.
And super scary. Reasonably, my parents were upset with it. My family was upset with it. And I didn't know what to tell the community. To this day, a lot of people don't know I'm not in college.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, we can get into what I'm, doing, all of that, is whole separate podcast in itself. But I think it's just important, that decision in itself. I think after leaving seminary, right? So this decision to go back to my community, right? That was the first time that I'd made a decision truly following my heart and where I felt the Lord was leading me, with no outside reasoning. Because outside reasoning, everything was telling me otherwise.
Yeah.
Right? I wasn't struggling academically. It would have been good for me to, it's useful to have a degree. It's useful for all of these things. I could have done it. It was online. It wasn't really like taking away time. All of these things, right? That objectively from the outside, there was really no reason for me to stop doing that. But it was such a strong pull of my heart that this wasn't right. This wasn't for me. That I had to make that decision. I don't want to say had to, but in the sense that I felt that I had to make that decision.
I share the sentiment in that there's a certain obedience that is due to your heart.
Yeah.
Like you gotta, and we shouldn't confuse obedience to the heart as obedience to emotions.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's so critical, because that was the only struggle really of this decision. I knew what my heart was telling me.
Right.
But the struggle was in my mind. I was like, don't just, jump to your passions.
Right.
Don't just make this random decision because you feel like your heart's there if there's no other reason, right? But the thing is, it's not that there was no other reason. It's that those were I think those were not revealed to me at the time, so that for once I could trust my heart.
Mm.
And again, because it's so much after that in itself, I think it's better to not go too much into where I'm at right now.
Sure.
But after that, the Lord gave me so many objective reasons as to why that was the right decision.
Clarity comes in time. Yeah.
Right. Like just so many practical things, so many things with here's how you're going to make money.
Right.
Here's how you're going to do ministry.
Yeah.
Here's how you're going to learn. Here's how you're going to do this, and that. But at the moment, that decision had to come purely from abandonment. And that's really the key of this all, right?
Yeah. I think that's going to be a central theme that we are always called to, us two in particular, we're always called to kind of proclaim to the nations, abandonment. Yeah. And here you are.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
What about you, man?
Yeah, I guess we got to wind back the clock a little bit. So where I left off, I was just entering junior year, right? So we kind of shared already like what Abhi and I, how our relationship kind of started in that first semester, right? The one semester you were there. And it's funny, like you were there for a semester, but the quality of our friendship grew into like that lifelong level,
right?
And I think on in a more general space to give an idea of where I was coming in junior year, like everything was just starting to click for me in a lot of ways. Like I started to recognize it was a huge gift just to recognize like my lifelong friends. Abi was one of them, Kristen, Gloria, Dominic Lazzaroni, Conrad Espino, Micah Ventura. Like I knew these guys, like these brothers, would be the guys that I would run with for the rest of my life, or I'd try to keep close, to run with the rest of my life. Conrad. And shout out to Conrad Espino, man. What the smartest guy we know, and also the dumbest guy we know.
What a great description.
At the same time, yeah.
Nastiest farts.
And it's crazy to think that, from my perspective, right? Like from that, all of my close brothers were in one house for one semester together. That's
amazing.
It's such a gift. Such a gift. So my network, my circle of friends, it's being locked down, right? So I see that, I was like, dang, like this is awesome, I start to make friends outside of campus, right? This is good. All the desires of my heart are really starting to come up, or so I thought, right? I remember, so like everything's just starting to look good, and then something happens. I still do not know how to accurately put words to my junior year of seminary. I can only like depict it like poetically. Like I felt like I woke up junior year. Just the Lord started to add an intensity to my prayer life. And I think if there's anything, the common thread here between your story and my story is the movements of prayer. And how we live out of that, and how that informs everything else, right? And like I said from the beginning, like I always paid attention to the heart. And there was like another way I can describe it is like I just woke up to beauty. Like I finally realized what beauty is.
Yeah.
And you had a very similar experience. So that was one thing. Just like, oh my gosh, I started doing all this research on what beauty is, how the heart actually moves. Father Matt started to literally give us like spiritual conferences on this stuff.
Severe Mercy, all these.
I started to read all these books, Severe Mercy is one of the best books I've ever read. Go read it.
Please.
It'll change your life. It might actually. So that all just started to happen. All these things, and at the same time, I started to recognize my deep desire for ministry. Like, we were in seminary and everything, but there's something particular about the call to ministry that started to come up. I remember like how this started to come up. Like we were at Loyola University Chicago. Their Catholicism is no comment. And I remember like behind the walls of our seminary, we would just kind of laugh at it, mock it.
Right. Yeah. What was the building we'd make fun of?
Yeah, Mertz.
Mertz building, yeah.
And it was honestly like just antagonistic.
Yeah.
Just a really bad spirit to it. And I remember being deeply disturbed by that, because my thought process was, we know the faith. We know its beauty, we know its richness. Why are we not going out there and trying to help people grow in their faith, right?
I always say it's easier to tear down than it is to build up.
Straight up. And isn't this the whole idea of priesthood? Or like one central idea of priesthood, of wanting to help people grow in their faith? This is the one chance. This is the most immediate chance we have to do that, and none of us are doing it. And I started to really look within myself and started to ask the Lord, like, what am I supposed to do here?
Yeah.
And that's when Micah and I started to talk a lot about this. That's when I started to meet really good people on campus who providentially started to express the same desires. Karina, Kylene. So it actually became us four: Micah, Karina, and Kylene. We all we got really tight because we all felt this call to minister in a way to students at Loyola.
Yeah. That brought me so much joy just to see that little squad, because coming into seminary, I thought we'd just be in this little secluded thing, right? But seeing you guys in that group of friends with other people on campus, and like, amazing.
And I think that only added to like the consolation of that first semester of junior year. Like, not only do I have good guy friends, I've got good women friends too.
Yeah.
This is all going to help my priesthood.
Yeah.
Right. And it was beautiful. And I even remember by the end of junior year, I admitted to the Lord, like, yeah, I'm going to apply for major seminary. I think I'm ready to make that decision. And then second semester happens. It begins, right? And in my prayer, there's a new idea that starts to come up of how the Lord is not calling me to be a priest, right? And there's a variety of things that kind of back up that idea. One of them, the biggest one was not what. So I think like the best way to explain it is like by second semester of junior year, there's this new idea starts to come up that I'm not called to be a priest, and I struggle with that because of this wound that we kind of both expressed, that the priesthood is the only way to truly give your life to God.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, to be utterly honest about it, I thought it was the only way that I could give my life to God.
Yeah.
It was coming from like a self-centeredness, you know? And all of a sudden, my whole life, like throughout that whole semester, right, junior year, second semester, my whole life's in a frenzy because I can feel the Lord trying to like open up my hands just to let it go, and I'm not willing to let go, right? I mean, who could blame me? This was my main attraction since the 10th grade.
Yeah, especially because, like what you're talking about, that even in that desire for ministry, right? I think we kind of tell ourselves, especially because, okay, Cyril Malabar priest, very specific. We kind of have an idea. Obviously, there's many varieties. I'm sure the new priest can speak to this of like not knowing what's going to happen. But at the same time, there is a sort of specific path that's taking you, and kind of everything is, in a sense, laid out.
Yeah, I've got a great, I already have a great idea of what it's all going to look like. I've already been to parishes. Right. I know what the ministry looks like.
Right. I know what the years to come look like. I love Mundelein, like all of these things.
Right. Like I had, everything was laid out. Sure, I still didn't know Malayalam, but I was going to figure that out at some point, right? And then this new idea, and I know it's not coming. I knew it wasn't coming from a place of fear, which is why I had to consider it. This new idea started to come up like, Josh, I don't want you to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was just super afraid to open up my hands. But the Lord is gentle, right? So yeah, so I think like one of the first things that happened as this idea was flourishing was we found out St. Joseph's closing. So this was after you left.
Yeah.
Beginning of second semester, we find out our seminary is going to close in Chicago, and I find out I'm going to transfer to St. John Vianney Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota. So really just to brush through second semester, I just continued to pray with this idea. I continue to grow in a lot of ways. I feel like junior year was just a lot of healing in a lot of places. Right?
Yeah.
Just overall, just an incredible, beautiful second semester. But by the end of it, I was like, okay, there's something really serious. Like I really need to like answer this question. Like, Lord, where do you want me to go?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I remember that that summer I spent the summer was opportune, right? Like it was a beautiful opportunity because I got to spend the summer at the cathedral, just interning there, right? Just watching the life of
Were you like mainly with Kevin Hutchin?
Yeah. So I kind of split my time between Kevin Hutchin and Father Thomas, the pastor. Both of them incredible priests in their own way. And it was really cool to see two different styles of priesthood. The sisters there, Sister Linda and Sister Metzi, just spiritual mothers to me. Everything was going well during my time of apostolate, right? While I'm there at the cathedral. But yet, like, this was supposed to be the time where, like, I was like, Lord, like, this is the time to confirm that you're calling me to be a priest.
Yeah.
Like, I'm literally in the priestly life right now. This is it. And it didn't come.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't come. There was actually a deep desolation that came with that. And it was really scary. And I was like, dang, I don't know what to do now.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I've got this huge decision to make.
Especially for you, because that's 3 years in. It's a huge difference from 5 months, 5-6 months for me.
I'm approaching the halfway point, right? And I don't know where to go and whatnot. And it was very clear I was in like this sort of desolation, like this deep darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, I'm so confused that I even start to question, like, should I even go to St. John Vianney? Mm-hmm. Should I even move to St. Paul, right? And I remember picking up this book on the discernment of spirits. And I open up to I had been casually reading it, and I open up to the chapter where I left off, and the title of it is "Never Make a Decision in a State of Desolation." So I don't even bother reading the rest of it. I close the book, and I'm like, okay, we're going to St. Paul, Minnesota.
Yeah.
And it was good discernment then, and literally, fast forward to August of that year, I finished the apostolate. Convention happens that year, right? I got to see you.
Yeah,
that was a good time.
That's right. That was the first time since seminary.
Straight up, yeah. I get to St. John Vianney Seminary, and the Lord just meets me with His consolation and His love. That the year I had at St. John Vianney Seminary, or not even a year because coronavirus happened, but the time I spent there was so crucial to my discernment. The one thing about that seminary in particular, they do a holy hour every day, an hour of prayer every day in front of the Blessed Sacrament. In the morning, 6:30, 7:30. Game changer.
Yeah.
Game changer. Changed my prayer life.
For context, St. Joseph's was a lot more free in the sense of
different
it was kind of just up to you, like what you wanted to do.
Yeah. There was a freedom to it, but also, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But yeah, St. John Vianney, like the priests were there. Father Matt came with us there.
Yeah.
Father Matt became my official spiritual director.
Mm-hmm. Was that by choice or assignment?
That was by choice.
Okay,
that was by choice because we both had our own spiritual directors while we were at St. Joe's.
Right.
But Father Matt was basically like another, like he was the second pseudo spiritual director.
Yeah.
And then I knew going in, I didn't want to like update some other priest on like my whole story.
He kind of knows a lot of the background.
He already knew the whole thing, and I was like, Father, like this, can we just continue this relationship formally? And he was like, yeah, for sure.
Said it exactly like that, probably too.
Literally, yeah. So yeah, like I think it was in those holy hours with every morning at St. John Vianney. It was in good conversations with Conrad, with other guys at the seminary. It was in ministry. I got to continue campus ministry at the university in St. Paul. It was in going to Calcutta with the missionaries to serve with the missionaries of charity. Right? It was an 8-day silent retreat. All these things helped me to come to this decision that the Lord was calling me out of seminary. And honestly, I'm not trying to toot my horn or anything, but I really did take my time on this.
Yeah.
To really carefully consider this.
Absolutely. Which is, again, to stress, that's the beauty in how different our discernment processes became after a certain point.
Right. Because we were both following the Lord's timing.
Exactly.
That's exactly it. Like by the end of junior year, I was not in a place to say, no, I'm not called to be a priest.
Yeah.
I needed that whole year. I needed to take my time with this. Right. Whereas you, like the Lord was working at a much faster pace, right? There's no cookie cutter.
No.
There's no blueprint.
The whole thing, right? He will make it abundantly clear at the time, not in time, like not in a certain amount of time.
Exactly.
Right. Like,
exactly. And I think I can honestly say by the end of January 2020, right after my 8-day silent retreat, it was abundantly clear the Lord was calling me out of seminary and into a new life. And I felt the same way. I felt called to come home, back to California.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the crazy thing, right? Coming home to California.
It's yeah. Yes, sir. That's exactly it. And no, yeah, even at that silent retreat, the Lord in very clear ways was just saying surrender, abandon, adopt a spirituality of surrender. Keep your hands off the plan, you know? And I guess just to tie up this whole story, right? Because now we are where we are, right?
Exactly.
This is what month is it? It's July 2020. We are learning. We have not gotten everything figured out.
Absolutely not. And
I feel like maybe just to, in a one sentence summary, everything we've described to you, the listener, is just us learning how to surrender.
Yeah.
Us learning how to abandon, how to get our egos out of the way, how to make decisions out of love and not out of fear.
Right.
It's been beautiful. Like we're not even, and I think that's so important to remember. Like we're not. Okay, you were a hooligan. I was not in high school. But like we weren't like these super terrible people that were totally off-road. Like we're very normal people. And you honestly might be thinking to yourself like, that was a super confusing story. You're right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's life for you.
Yeah.
But how beautiful it has been.
Yeah.
How beautiful it has been to learn who the Lord is, to learn who we are in truth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, if anything, like the last thing I want to say is I want to encourage you to recognize that you have a story and God wants to write your story in a very particular way. Don't ever spend time comparing that story to somebody else, right? Because that was always a struggle for us.
Yeah.
You don't need to compare it to anybody else. You just need to look at the Lord as a son or daughter, right?
Yeah.
RIM. That was the acronym Father Matt Alexander gave to us. Changed the game. Relationship, identity, mission. That's how you, if you want the blueprint on how to discern, that's it right there. Look at your relationship and recognize that you are son or daughter of God. And in that relationship, you will come to your identity. And at some point when the Lord sees fit, you'll understand the mission.
Right. And if any of those are out of place, and you start going through this checklist, even a checklist of holiness per se, oftentimes it's a checklist of like worldly things, right? But sometimes even if we try to go through this checklist of what a saint's supposed to be, what discernment's supposed to look like, still not falling into relationship,
right,
identity, and mission.
I think a lot of us start with mission, right? Especially in our Kerala culture, we start with mission, and that will determine our identity. And that's just how many people have been so confused by that sort of ideology. Straight up, start with this relationship, right? And everything will go from there. Just fall in love with the Lord. Allow the Lord to reveal Himself to you. Take your hands off your life. Yeah. And I think, dang, that's a good place to end this story, which is paradoxically the beginning of the rest of this podcast.
Amen.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. Praise be Jesus Christ.
Always forever.